Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar hosted by Nutanix, HYCU, and ExaGrid. We'll be starting in a few minutes. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. I can see that people are still logging in, so we'll wait for just a few more moments, and then we can begin. We'll begin in 30 seconds, guys. Just waiting for everybody. All right. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to this joint webinar hosted by Nutanix, HYCU, and ExaGrid. My name is Abbas, and I'll be your moderator for the session. So before we begin, just so I know everything is working all right, you can see the screen, you can hear me clearly. Can you type a quick yes in the questions box for me, please? Yep, Kyle, John, Mark, Jason, Rob. All right, I'm getting a series of yeses. I think everything is working fine. Great. So a few hygiene announcements. If you want to take screenshots, captures of the presentation, feel free to do so. But just so you know, we will be sending a recording of this webinar along with the slides presented to all of you. So you will have all the content that is presented today for your reference. Having said that, if you have any questions at any time during the webinar, please send them to us in the questions box. We have a team online apart from the presenters as well to answer any of the questions. We will also have a Q&A session in the end, and if we cannot answer any of the questions during the webinar itself, we will get in touch with you via email to answer them. And one last point before we begin. We are presenting this webinar from different offices, different locations across the globe. So I have my fingers crossed, but please bear with us during transitions and if we run into any issues. All right, so joining us today, we have Subhaya Sundaram, VP of Products at HYCU, Mark Crespi, who is the VP of North America Solution Architects at ExaGrid, and finally, Mark Niemeyer, the Director of Product Management at Nutanix. We have an action-packed agenda today with 3 partners coming together to offer a joint solution. We will start off with a brief introduction to Nutanix. Mark will give us an overview of Nutanix and how we can leverage it across the technology stack. Subhaya will give us an overview of HYCU and how it works with Nutanix and ExaGrid. HYCU is the first purpose-built backup and recovery solution for Nutanix. We will follow that up with Mark Crespi, who will explain how ExaGrid works seamlessly together as a secondary storage for backup with deduplication. We will also have a demo to show you how the entire solution fits together. So stay tuned till the end of the webinar. Lastly, we will conclude with a Q&A session, taking up any questions asked during the webinar. With that, I would like to hand over the presentation to Mark. Over to you, Mark.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Abbas. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, people on the phone. Thanks for joining us today. Very excited today to talk about this nice solution together, where Nutanix is the preferred platform to run your most business critical applications. HYCU providing enterprise class data protection for those applications. And then, like Abbas already explained, ExaGrid as the secondary storage, very much a scale-out solution to do the longer-term archival and storage of those backup images. HYCU and ExaGrid, both very good partners of Nutanix, both certified within the Nutanix Ready program. It's the solution has been implemented at many customers around the world. So very much an enterprise level, a ready solution for you to start thinking about in your organization, how to deploy applications on Nutanix, how to back them up using HYCU onto ExaGrid as the secondary storage. Before we go into some of the HYCU specifics and the ExaGrid specifics, I want to talk a little bit about Nutanix and the native data protection capabilities that are built into the Nutanix platform before handing it over to Sabaya, who can talk to the Comtrade HYCU functionality, as well as handing it over to Mark to talk about the ExaGrid benefits. I assume that a lot of people on the phone are familiar with Nutanix already, but just in case there are new people to Nutanix on the phone. So Nutanix, we call ourselves a hyper-converged software company. We're building what we call an enterprise OS that allows you to manage your applications in a very efficient way. Like if you look at your classical three-tier architecture in your data center, which has been around for the last 20, 25, maybe even 30 years now, where you have your SANs, your storage, your networking, your servers, your virtualization, and then your applications. All of these are managed completely separate, different management consoles, different CLIs, different error messages. So all in all, very complex, and your IT staff, maybe even yourself, you're spending a lot of time managing that complexity and making sure that everything is running, right? With the public cloud coming in, people are getting more and more, I would almost say, almost spoiled, right? If you log into AWS, if you log into Google or to Azure, you can spin up new workloads very quickly. It's very easy to make use of cloud native services like Lambda, Kubernetes, et cetera. And you also get things like fractional consumption. Only pay for those resources that you're actually using. Your classical three-tier architecture, it's very hard to provide any of those benefits to yourself, to your customers, to your employees within your company. That's where Nutanix comes in. Nutanix, it's like I said, a hyper-converged solution where typically we ship as an appliance, but more and more you'll see us go into like a software-only route as well, where you can take our software, the power of our software, and apply it to any hardware that is out there. But the basis of it, it's hiding, it's managing all of the complexity that is today in your data center, right? So this one single box has everything you need in terms of storage, in terms of networking, in terms of compute, in terms of virtualization. And everything is built with scale out in mind, right? Our early engineers, they came from Google, they came from Facebook, and so on. So everything we design is built with scale up, scale out in mind. So very easy to add new nodes, very easy to just-in-time provisioning, and so on. So integrated scale out compute and storage, right? We support, of course, we support the vSphere hypervisor, we support Hyper-V as the hypervisor, and we now ship our own hypervisor for about the last 2 years as well, that we call AHV, which basically makes the virtualization layer, makes it invisible as well. So we make storage invisible, we make networking invisible, we make virtualization invisible. So you can care only about managing your applications and building higher value services on top of the platform that we provide. From a data protection perspective, everything is built into this storage fabric that is within our box as well, right? A lot of solutions out there, you see data protection is almost like an afterthought. It's a bolt-on. No, Nutanix was designed with data protection in mind. So things like snapshotting, replication, synchronous replication, all of this is part of the core operating system, the core storage fabric that sits within the Nutanix box. So using those primitives, using those data services, we provide a very wide spectrum of functionality for data protection. Right? So whether it's snapshotting, backing up to cloud, whether it's disaster recovery, whether it's something like a metro availability solution where you have like a stretched cluster, or we have very nice integration with third parties, and that's what we're talking about today. How does the Nutanix platform integrate with HYCU, and how does it integrate with ExaGrid, right? Very quickly running through the Nutanix native capabilities, because that's kind of important to understand where the Nutanix functionality stops and where we hand it over to data protection vendors like HYCU, like ExaGrid. All of the Nutanix data protection capabilities are built on the Nutanix snapshots. We've built these snapshots technology from the ground up, very, very efficient. Everything is at the byte level. Everything is redirect on write. So as efficient of a snapshot as you can get. And these snapshots are not at the LUN level or at the data store level like you see with a lot of the legacy vendors out there. No, we actually know exactly what storage is in use by which virtual machine, and we can snapshot just that storage. So that means that you can set up very powerful policies based on your applications, saying, oh, my mission critical application, I want to snapshot every 15 minutes and I want to retain that data for 7 months. Whereas the file server that is sitting over in the corner over there that has my vacation pictures on it, for instance, I'm just snapshotting that once a week and I'm retaining it maybe for 3 months just in case I delete something I shouldn't have deleted, and I can recover from that. But yeah, the snapshots, you can set up very powerful policies to protect your applications at the right level that you want to protect them on. We do support application consistent snapshots as well as crash consistent snapshots, and all of this is managed through Prism, our management UI. And it's kind of independent of which hypervisor you're running on Nutanix. It's going to be the same management functionality whether you're running ESX, Hyper-V, or our own hypervisor AHV. We have a little bit of self-service capabilities as well, so you can kind of do a file level restore from within virtual machines. But that's kind of outside of the scope over there, so I'm not going to talk about that. But yeah, all in all, very efficient, VM-centric management, very much policy-based management of your snapshots, of your retention, of your RPOs, etc. On top of these snapshot technologies and replication technologies, I should say, we have built very intuitive and very powerful disaster recovery workflows. So by setting up policies that take snapshots and then replicate them to a secondary Nutanix cluster, we then have workflows on top of those that allow you to fail over virtual machines. And you can do that either in a controlled way, where we bring down the virtual machine, replicate over the last state for that application, and then bring it up. Or in case of a data center outage or a power outage, you can bring up the application from the last snapshot that is present on the secondary side, on the DR cluster. Just like we were very powerful on the policy side, we are very powerful on the topology side as well. So we support things like fan in, fan out. You can set up around the sun. You can do multiple replication from a particular application going to multiple locations, so it's protected maybe within the metro area as well as across the country. And once again, all of this is managed through Prism. One of the cool things we do is we can protect workloads running on vSphere, on ESX, and then build DR on AHV, on our own hypervisor. So you can save a little bit of the vSphere licensing cost there, so you can run AHV in your disaster recovery data sets. We also have so we call this the async replication or async DR. We also have the availability or the possibility of setting up completely synchronous replication between two Nutanix clusters. Of course, there is some restrictions around distance, around latency, right? It has to be less than 5 milliseconds round trip time between the two sites. Otherwise, there's just too much I/O overhead. But the thing here is it's a full copy that is available, a full consistent copy that's always available on your secondary site. So zero RPO, no data loss in any case. Virtual machines run on your primary site, and at the moment it does a write. We wait until we get acknowledged from the secondary side before we acknowledge the write back to the virtual machines. And so this means that the two clusters are always in sync. There's always two full copies that are completely the same on both sides. We do have witness capabilities, so you can automate failovers. You can set it up so it's active, so different applications run on your primary and your secondary side, and they basically do cross-replication against each other. And then you can set up a third copy as well, so you can do metro between two clusters, and then you can do an async snapshotting schedule to your third cluster to provide wide area failovers and so on. So that's kind of what Nutanix provides in a nutshell from a native perspective. Over to you, Subaya. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I hope you guys can see my slides. I'll be very quick. As Mark said, Nutanix provides a fantastic platform. Now the question is that HYCU was the first purpose-built backup product for Nutanix. So when people ask us, so what's special about HYCU, right? First, it's a purpose-built. Second thing, HYCU was the first product which actually leverages the Nutanix storage level snapshots and creates a hypervisor agnostic backup for both AHV and ESX. So the first product which can leverage storage level snapshot both for any hypervisor which you are currently using there. That's the second thing. The third thing, when we talk to customers, a lot of times when they move to the new virtual world, a lot of people have decided to use the VM as the construct. But at the end of the year, your business cares about the applications. And what we wanted to make sure is that every operation you do is around the application focus. That's one of the reasons we have a patent pending technology around automated application discovery and the automated application backup and recovery there. So I'll talk to you a little bit here, and I'll also even when we show the entire solution coming together, we'll show you a quick demo. When we talk about HYCU, we say we were built with the same Nutanix philosophy in mind. What do we mean by that? Nutanix, the biggest thing which Nutanix did for customers is simplify the entire infrastructure as a service, right? It made they talk about the one-click on OS, and I think that's something we took to heart. And we wanted to simplify the entire data protection process for customers. When I show these numbers, sometimes people think, oh, you must be kidding. Actually, in reality, this is a true set of numbers. You can actually see, if you go to YouTube, you can see one of our partners who recorded the entire deployment and backup and recovery of HYCU in less than 30 minutes or so, complete end-to-end. Not something which you normally hear of an enterprise class product. That's something we do today. And anybody, just to think in terms of HYCU is a virtual appliance deployed right on your Nutanix system, so you don't require a separate infrastructure. So again, it's a simple virtual appliance. Anybody who knows Nutanix knows how to create a VM from a disk image, and it's as simple as that. In a product which focuses on application, as I said, one of the things that HYCU does is that we automatically discover what applications are running in your VM. That is, in most applications, most backup software, you have to go tell which VMs are running which applications and configure. With HYCU, we do the other way around. We tell you what's running in each of the VM, and then you decide what policy to apply, and that's it. It's all done. It's a completely agentless technology. And what we currently actually have in our official released version is around Microsoft SQL, Active Directory, and Exchange. We have a lot more additional applications coming up very shortly. With regards to the functionality of the solution, from a SQL perspective, let's talk about Exchange first. Exchange we do at the database level, and we do have a procedure for the mailbox level too for the customer. With regards to SQL and Active Directory, with SQL, let me talk about SQL because I think that's what a lot of you are actually very interested in. In SQL, we can restore the entire instance, we can restore individual databases, as well as we can clone the entire SQL server or parts of the SQL server for the customer. All this leveraging the Nutanix snapshot technology. That's why, I mean, individually, some of these functionalities available in other software, but the combination of Nutanix plus HYCU makes it a lot more powerful, most efficient solution for the customer. This is from an application backup perspective. So the thing which I want to switch here right now is that people talk about saying, you guys do applications. Can you tell me a little about why is it because when we first released HYCU back in June of last year at .next, we started with AHV. So a lot of customers still think we are actually only AHV, but actually we currently support AHV and ESX. Then we announced ESX support. People asked us, so what's special about you? There are a couple of things which we do differently than other vendors. The first is that many of you who have managed VMware environment know about the VM stun problem. It doesn't happen all the time, but it does happen to applications. When you're running a backup, the application feels there's a stun. And that is something, that's a problem you will not have with HYCU and Nutanix. The main reason is that you leverage the Nutanix storage level snapshots, even in the ESX world, so it's extremely efficient and the application impact is almost not there. As I said, again, we have a hypervisor agnosticism. And the thing is that our entire software is around policy-based. One significant difference in HYCU compared to some of the other solutions you guys would see is that in most other solutions, they ask you how often you want to back up. They very rarely ask you what's the speed at which you want to recover, meaning how much time do you have to recover? That is something HYCU actually enables you to do. You can specify your recovery time objective and we'll make sure your data gets back, even the worst case, this is the worst case time. Your data, you'll be up and running within that time window. That's the RTO aspect of it. So those are some of the things we do for the ESX and AHV. I do want to talk about two other use cases which are probably very relevant to many of you. Many of you actually have probably remote sites where you actually have systems there. And Nutanix actually provides a great solution for the robo sites, the remote office, branch office sites. And when people deploy that, you typically don't have administrators on the remote office, branch office. And what we allow you to do is that, so no, forget us, but what the customers need is two things, right? You want to make sure there is a disaster recovery option available. And the second thing is you need to back up the data. From a DR perspective, Nutanix technology provides a fantastic option for the production data. They automatically provide the DR for the application, and it's works perfect. Now the question is, traditionally for the backup, when you think in terms of remote office, every vendor actually supports it, including HYCU, we actually supported it. But we said, it's crazy that the data moves from the remote site to the central site twice. One is for the DR and the other one is for the backup. We said there must be a better way. We should be able to optimize that. So we worked with Nutanix and came up with a methodology and a technology such that you can back up off your DR copy rather than your source. You still will be able to recover to the original source, but we can back up off your DR. That's the benefit there. So you cut the bandwidth requirement by almost half, right? That's a big benefit. And the biggest thing which I like is that more than the bandwidth is the simplicity of management. Exactly, whether it's one site or 100 sites, it's exactly the same way you manage in HYCU. But when it comes down to configuration, there's only one small option you turn on if you want this functionality. Everything else is exactly the same. So the simplicity is a big aspect there. The other second use case, which I want to emphasize here, apart from the ESX AHV and the Robo, is around AFS. Nutanix actually has the Acropolis File Services. This is their NAS offering, which has SMB, and they've announced NFS. They have NFS right now, SMB and NFS. And customers need to back up these file systems. People who have dealt with large file systems know how complex it is to back up a file system. It's sometimes much more complex than backing up a VM or an app. And the main reason is it takes a long time as the file system grows. The good thing is that we were lucky enough to work with Nutanix team and we deliver a solution which is extremely efficient for the customer. In the sense that when you have the first time when you back up a file server, you obviously have to back up every file. But the next time when you go, traditionally, that's where the most backups fail because it takes such a long time to go file by file to see if something has changed. When you imagine millions of files, I do know of customers who back up for almost like 4 or 5 days a single file system. That's just not, in today's age, that's not the right thing. So we worked with Nutanix. They've introduced something called change file tracking, and we can do an extremely efficient backup for customers. And the whole thing takes probably 100th the time which you take with your traditional legacy backup. And it's just not the time, it's the amount of resources which actually sucks up from the production servers. All that is actually eliminated for the customer. And all this with the same level of simplicity you can actually deliver. That's something with HYCU you could do. For a backup product run, you need a target. You need a And that too, when you think in terms of Nutanix, you need a scalable target, right? Nutanix is a scale-out system, and you need a scale-out backup target too, because as your production grows, you got to be able to secondary storage grows. And we have Mark Crespi, who is actually going to give you a quick rundown on how you can leverage ExaGrid to actually do that.
So with that said, I'll go ahead and share my presentation, and everybody should be seeing the slides here shortly. If any of the other presenters notice the slides haven't appeared, just please let me know.
You're good.
So thanks again for your time today. Let me talk a little bit about ExaGrid. Obviously, in any data protection solution, the target is an important component of that solution, and the target that you choose may have a major impact on not only the simplicity and integrity of your backups, but also potentially on the economics of your backups. So ExaGrid is we're the largest independent vendor in the space of what became known as disk-based backup with deduplication. We have been a Nutanix partner now for just about a year. We are 100% focused on this space, so we are experts in disk-based backup. What sets us apart from the other potential players in this market that have either hardware or software-based solutions is that we have a very highly differentiated architecture. We also have a very large global customer base with tens of thousands of systems installed worldwide, global enterprise support capabilities, and enterprise class system. And unlike many of our potential competitors, we have a very large amount of customer success evidence. If you were to go to our website, you'll see somewhere around 370 documented customer success stories that were sanctioned by the customers themselves that had the ExaGrid experience. So we're happy to be a part of this great partnership with Nutanix and HYCU. Basically, we are the target for the HYCU backups that are coming from the Nutanix platform, and we ingest that backup data and we apply a very advanced version of data deduplication to make the storage of your backups very, very efficient. So you can store a large amount of data, a significant amount of retention, and a relatively small amount of disk footprint, which makes for a very economic backup solution, one of the leading economic solutions in the market. Deduplication has been around for some time now, well over a decade, and in many cases, when people hear the word, they sometimes think of it like compression, meaning that it's all the same, that every deduplication implementation is roughly going to deliver the same amount of benefit. But there actually are some significant considerations that you need to take into account when you look at a potential deduplication solution and how the vendor actually implemented that solution. The first two considerations are obvious in that deduplication was built to provide storage efficiency. If we didn't have this amazing algorithm at our disposal, disk would be far too expensive as a backup target, and we'd still be stuck in the prehistoric times of tape. So without deduplication, disk would not be a viable alternative as a backup target for your critical data. Also, in the same token, the ability to replicate that data offsite to replace the concept of offsite tape storage delivers bandwidth efficiency. So that's an extremely important consideration. And if I stopped here, I'd be describing a number of the potential vendors from whom you can select deduplication technology from. Not all, but many. But there are other considerations as well. Deduplication does not come without drawbacks. One of the drawbacks is the ingest and rehydration penalty. In order to break up the data and store it in an efficient format, as well as then rehydrate that data upon recovery, how the deduplication algorithm is implemented can make a big difference in both your backup performance and your restore performance. ExaGrid chose a method called adaptive deduplication, which, unlike the inline deduplication counterparts, we allow data to land in segments on disk and then apply data deduplication in parallel, but our algorithm actually adapts to the speed of the backup. So if we see any interference from our deduplication algorithm in the speed of your backups, we will throttle it back to allow the data to land. So in other words, we're favoring your backup window. And as a result, we have 5 to 10 times the ingest rate of any of the other appliance-based vendors, and even a more significant advantage over any of the vendors that do it in software. On the recovery side, we actually cache the most recent copies of your backups. So as a result, when you go to restore, obviously the vast majority of your restores are typically going to come from recent backups. We're doing that without the rehydration penalty. The data is coming directly back in native format, just as HYCU would have written it to disk. So from there, you get very, very rapid restores. To Sabaya's point, using the snapshotting and replication technologies for very short RTOs, but in the backup RTO world, we're going to lead the industry in how fast you can recover from a given backup. And then finally, as part of a scale-out architecture, you basically want your performance to grow in lockstep with the workload. And with the ExaGrid solution, we have a scale-out architecture that means that every time your data grows in any significant amount, we're not going to simply add storage, but we're going to add compute, network, memory, all of the necessary resources to maintain a short backup window that you started with. So I talked a little bit about the adaptive data deduplication. The way we implement this is we have something called a landing zone, which none of the other deduplication vendors employ. What the landing zone is some extra disk that we've set aside so that adaptive deduplication can allow your backups to land while we're deduplicating and replicating in parallel. And the benefit of that is there's no inline processes to slow your backups down. And as a result, from the recovery side, there's no rehydration penalty for your recoveries. So our customers will tell us that they've never had restores that run as quickly as they have with an ExaGrid, whether they were using tape previously. But the majority of our business these days is actually replacing other appliance vendors, mostly the inline implementations where the recovery times are not satisfactory, given that you've spent the money to use disk instead of tape at that point. As far as our scale-out system goes, it is truly a scale-out architecture. So if you look at the other backup deduplication vendors, they all use some form of what's called a scale-up architecture, which is an architecture we've known for a long time in primary storage, where you have a controller and you typically are able to add some capacity to that controller until it reaches its maximum, and at which point it can no longer maintain the performance of the amount of data that you're storing, or in this case, backing up. And the end result of that is typically some form of a forklift upgrade or creating another silo with a separate controller that doesn't share deduplication, doesn't share management, et cetera. So you end up with a highly siloed environment. With the ExaGrid scale-out architecture, each unit of expansion is a complete, fully functioning appliance. So as our customers grow, they're adding full computing nodes into a scale-out system that come with CPU, memory, networking, and disk. Therefore, if you start out, say, at 100 terabyte full data backup with some amount of retention, and your data ultimately doubles to 200 terabyte, we double the performance profile of the system at the same time that we're doubling your capacity utilization. And the result of this is everything scales linearly. Backups, restores, deduplication performance, replication performance, all scale linearly as your system grows. And you never have to face any kind of capacity-based or performance-based forklift upgrade with ExaGrid, because we can scale up to 2 petabytes of data in a singly managed system. Another aspect of the ExaGrid story is both a technology and a philosophical guarantee. When we entered the market in the early days of disk-based backup, we decided to try to fix the economics that we saw the early disk-based vendors bringing to the market, which was much more like a primary storage story than it was a backup story. Typically, customers have wanted to keep their backup investments around longer because they're the secondary storage and not the primary storage. So many vendors will come in and give a low price at first and then raise prices on future purchases or expansion. We don't do that. We'll guarantee that you'll never pay more for any expansion systems than you paid for your initial systems. Another trick we've seen is that the maintenance is either set to list price or is raised at times to try to drive you to purchase the next generation system. We've eliminated both of those aspects. So when you're an ExaGrid customer, we guarantee that your maintenance will never increase by more than 3%. And we also guarantee that we'll set the maintenance price at a percentage of what you pay for the product versus an arbitrary list price. Because we're a scale-out architecture, you can't outgrow any single component of our system. You can scale up to 2 petabyte full backup in a single system, and then starting a secondary system is not particularly daunting as well. There's no guesswork. So a lot of the IT departments we talk to aren't sure how much their data is going to grow. Maybe their company is going to be acquired, et cetera. We don't force that guesswork because you can pay as you grow, and therefore any unexpected data growth can be met very, very economically. We've also eliminated the concept of end of life. So we have never end of lifed any of our generations of product. We have customers that go back 10 years that are running generations of products from 2007, 2008, and they're able to mix and match the new generation products in the very same system, run our latest and greatest software. And if they ever do a refresh, it's based on their requirements, not on any kind of arbitrary requirement that we set. And we provide all features at no additional cost. So there's no line items with our product. You get a quote for the product. All the software features are enabled and turned on, and there are no hidden charges that will cause any unpleasant surprises. So with that, and I'm going to turn it back over to Sabaya, who's going to show us the HYCU product.
I hope you guys can see my screen. Just wanted to bring up one of the slides which Mark Niemeyer started with. One of the things which I wanted to just talk about was what I'm going to do is give you a quick demo. Sorry about that. I'm going to give you a quick demo. With the demo, as you guys can imagine, what we're going to show is HYCU runs right on the Nutanix platform. It's a virtual appliance. Just to reiterate, it's a virtual appliance right on the Nutanix system. It discovers all your virtual machines and applications and backs it up to, in this case, an ExaGrid scale-out target. So I'm just going to give you a quick demo, and I hope you guys can see can you guys see my screen?
Yep, you could.
Yeah, thank you. So what you see here is the HYCU system which I'm logging into. As I mentioned, HYCU is a virtual appliance running right on your Nutanix system. So you don't require extra infrastructure. And what the way we do is we ship you a disk image, and then you create a VM of that. First time, as soon as you deploy HYCU, there are 5 things we expect you to do. Please change the password. It's a virtual appliance, so the best practice is to change the password. Tell us which Nutanix cluster or clusters to manage. Tell us which targets. In this case, we're going to show you ExaGrid. And then start backing up the VMs and apps. It's as simple as that. So the first thing, as I said, let's actually see what is it to add a Nutanix cluster. What you see here, when I show this to people, sometimes they ask, is it a Prism or is it HYCU? Because we wanted to make sure that for the Nutanix customers, it looks and feels like Prism. So we worked with the Nutanix team on that, and what you can see here is that all you have to give us is the Prism URL, an administrator name, and a password, and you'll be ready to go. It's as simple as that to start adding a cluster. So one of the things I want you to explicitly note here is that just for the demo purpose, we actually have 2 clusters here. One is running AHV, the other one is running ESX. You don't have to name it this way. We just named it so that you can actually see it. You can have a single pane of glass managing both ESX and AHV. You don't have to have different infrastructure. And as I go through the demo, you will notice you don't see difference between AHV and ESX because we wanted to follow the same Nutanix philosophy of hypervisor is an essential thing, but that's not the primary focus. That's not what we try to do. Okay, that's adding a Nutanix cluster. So once you add a cluster, HYCU obviously goes and discovers everything in your Nutanix infrastructure. What you see here is all of the VMs which we discovered in those 2 clusters. So now the question is, one of the questions I always ask my customers is that, do you know which applications are running in which VM? Majority of them have a hard time remembering because it's a challenge, right? Imagine in this case, it's a demo system. I have only about 20 plus VMs. In majority of your infrastructure, you have hundreds or even thousands of VMs in many cases. There is no way you can remember that. One of the things which HYCU does is that what we call automated application discovery. In this case, you can select all of the VMs, or just for simplicity, I'm just going to select one of the VMs. And then let's say I'll choose a different VM right now. And all we require is a basic credential. Once you apply the credential, we will automatically go and discover what applications are running inside it. So once we do that, I'm just going to show you. It looks like my time is out of sync. So what you see here, what you see here is the list of applications there. In this demo environment, I have a bunch of SQL servers, an Active Directory server, and an Exchange server. This is something HYCU determined itself. The customer did not have to do any additional configuration. It's just wanted to note that. So we discovered the Nutanix cluster, the VMs, and the apps. Now the question is, where are you going to store it to? What's the backup target, right? So adding a backup target is extremely simple. We would like customers to use solution targets like an ExaGrid scale-out target or a Nutanix target and so on. So that's what we would recommend to customers. but obviously customers do have other storage which they have in their infrastructure. HYCU can support NFS or SMB targets, as well as HYCU. It also supports cloud storage, which is S3 and Azure. Let me give you a quick rundown into what is it adding a target. For example, adding a target is like, sorry, if you want to just add this one, you can say ExaGrid target, and then you give it a specific description. Size is optional, because if you want to say it's a 10 terabyte system, but I want to give only 5 terabytes for backup, you can specify that. And then you just give it the specific IP address and infrastructure, and then we will automatically go and discover the target. One of the key things is that, again, we just not only discover the targets, we also look at the characteristics of the target. We constantly look at the performance of the target. In this case, I'm just a demo system, so don't look at the exact numbers. But we do keep track of what the performance is, because we use this to constantly compute the compliance of your system. So that is something there. This is an automatic thing. You don't have to do anything further at this point. The system automatically does it for you. Okay, so we identified the target. Now let's do what is it to backup. What we say in the solution, it's a one-click backup. What do I mean by that? So all you have to do is select a VM. It could be, you don't even have to select, we even have defaults, but let's assume in this case, I'm going to share a very simple use case. You select a VM and say, what policy do you want to apply? And let's say I will choose bronze policy, for example. Once you assign the bronze, sorry, and usually I'll use a different one. There's a demo systems issue. Okay, so once you assign a policy, you just apply, in this case, it's already bronze policy. Let's say once you assign it, the customer does only one assignment and the system takes care from their point on, meaning you don't specify, you don't have to specify targets, you don't have to configure jobs, you don't have to do retention management. All that is done behind the scene completely for you. It's completely automated. People say, really, is that true? Yes, that's true. And the thing is, from a consistency perspective, we try to do the highest level of consistency possible. Let's take, for example, even the managing application backups is exactly the same. All you have to do is select the application and choose which level of policy backup you want, and the system automatically does the right thing. For example, in the case of SQL, we use what's called the VDI method for SQL, which is one of the Microsoft recommended method. In the case of Exchange, we use the VSS method and Active Directory VSS and so on. So we do the right level of consistency automatic. The customer does not have to do any extra configuration. So that's the backup part. When I say this, and people say maybe the policies are complicated. So let me actually show you what is it to set the policy for you. By default, the system comes with a prepackaged set of policies, but you can create your own policy. Adding a policy is very simple. Let's say in this case, let me add a demo policy and add a description. There are 3 questions you got to answer to create a policy. The first question, how often you want to backup? That's the basic question you got to know. The second thing is, how much time do you have to recover? This is people who have lived in backup for a long time, recovery time objective. What's the time? How much time do you actually have to recover the data? This is an important number. I'll tell you why. Because when you commit to your business saying, guys, don't worry, I'll protect the data, you're committing to a particular SLO. And this SLO, what HYCU does is takes this information, looks at the performance of the targets, looks at the size of the VM, and automatically determines which is the right place to put your backup on. For example, if you have a terabyte VM, it doesn't make sense to put it on the cloud because I'll never get it back in time for you if you have 1 hour recovery window. Whereas I can use my local ExaGrid target and actually do that and actually get the same performance. That's why the recovery window. And the last thing is the retention. How long do you actually want to maintain it? It is just not one backup. You can actually have multiple copies. You can specify multiple copies if that's what you choose to. A lot of customers we see actually have a local on-prem copy and they try to move the second copy to the cloud. Absolutely, we can support that today. Some of the other things I'll just point out, we do have the capability to archive because as we started dealing with a lot more customers in the healthcare space and financial space, they obviously wanted archiving functionality, and we actually do that. One of the 2 other things I'll just point out, this fast restore functionality. HYCU is different than many other backups. In which sense? HYCU uses the Nutanix snapshots not just for backup, but also for recovery. What do I mean by that? What we have actually found out is that 95% of the customer recovery requests happens within the first 72 hours, meaning People, when they mess up a data, when they lose something, they recognize within the first 72 hours. So that's your predominant all of your requests. So what we recommend to customers is that even though you said you have 4 hours, 8 hours, whatever your recovery window, or a couple of hours to recover window, we can do much faster than that because we'll use the Nutanix snapshots to get your record data back. That's something there. So, and this is a configurable option. We recommend 3 days, but customers can choose however they'll want. And the last thing is around backup to replica. From replica, this is I talked to you about a robo solution where if you have remote office, branch office, instead of going over the WAN to do the backup, you can back up right from your central site. That is something that's the backup from replica there. So it's simple to create a backup policy that's there. I'm sure many of you looked at, yeah, policy is all great, but all I care about is the recovery. In the backup world, recovery is the most important thing. It's backup itself is an essential thing you got to do. So let's actually do a simple recovery case here. And somebody comes running to you and say, oh my God, I deleted something in my configuration files. Can you recover it back? You can do a single file level, file folder level recovery, or you could do an entire virtual machine. And let's assume you do a single file. What we do is that we automatically mount the container onto a copy of the container onto our controller and let the customer look at it like exactly like the way they would do in their local drive. They can choose the exact copy. Let's say in this case, you want the user. You can even search. But let's say you do on the user, you select that and you click there, and then you can specify saying you can bring the data back to the same virtual machine, or you can go to a file share, because sometimes when people actually have services teams, they want the service team not to touch the customer's VM, but put it on a share. You can do that. But let's assume you want to go to the same VM. We give you options. You can, within the same VM, you don't have to touch the original location. You can put it in an alternate location. We even take care of your credentials. We automatically put it back to the right way it was. That's a single file recovery. Again, it's extremely simple to do that. You can do that. You can also do, for example, entire virtual machines. Again, you can do the full VM. You can clone the VM. Instead of recovering to the same place, you can first clone it, including you can get the desk image if you want to do, for example, I saw a customer ask a question regarding ESX2 Hyper-V. You can actually get the entire disk image of the ESX and then run some utilities if you want to convert. Those are things you can do. I talked about VM, but actually probably the more interesting for a lot of you is probably application. I'm just going to show you one application. Let's say, for example, SQL, and let's actually do a restore. You can do the entire SQL, but majority of the customers come to recover individual items. As you guys know, in a single database, in a single instance of SQL, there are many, many databases. Most of the time when your DBA comes to saying, I need to recover something, they're not asking you to recover the whole thing. All they are asking you to recover one of the databases. And it's just not the database. Most of the time, they know the exact time they messed up. They said, oh my God, I messed up at today. At what time did you mess it up? I messed up, let's say, around 12:50 or whatever. So 2:50 or something like that. So you can go to 2:54, 2:50, 2:49, and then go to the right time and then recover it back. That allows you extremely granular recovery because we also manage all the transaction logs for the customer. And again, it's extremely fast because we use the Nutanix snapshots to the recovery here. And it's just not to the same instance. If you have multiple instances, you can even recover to an alternative instance for the customer. So it's very flexible from a recovery perspective. Similarly, you can do for Exchange and Active Directory and so on. So that's a quick thing there. We actually also do self-service. If you want to do self-service, you can actually do that. And the other thing I would probably mention is that we have REST APIs. If you want to completely automate, orchestrate, you can use REST APIs as well as we have CLI. So the combination of, if you think in terms of Nutanix from a fantastic production server system, which actually has great snapshot replication functionality, snapshot cloning replication functionality, HYCU takes it, leverages it, makes it extremely easy for you to consume the value in the platform. And then it can back up to a scale-out target like an ExaGrid system, which actually complements your Nutanix because Nutanix can scale out gradually and you can scale out your backup target too. And HYCU also scales along with it. So it's a fully scale-out system you have for your infrastructure. So that's a quick rundown. I hope I made some sense to you. So now let's actually switch to the last slide and probably answer any questions. So Abbas, we should pass it on to you.
Yep. Thank you so much, Subaya. And thank you, Mark Crespi and Mark Niemeyer, for a very informative session. So I'm just going to share my screen. Yep. So we will now open up to the audience for questions. If there are any questions that you have, please send them to us in the questions box. And while we are waiting for the questions to come in, I want to remind you that there's plenty of information available on what we discussed today. You can see the slide for your reference. You can go online. You can try our software for free or schedule a demo with our experts. There are links on the slide. If you want to get in touch with us, our email addresses are also on the slide. And if you have any questions for our presenters, you can also reach out to them. Their contact details were present in the beginning of the presentation, which will be shared with you after the webinar. All right, so I just want to have a look at the questions that are coming in. And
let me answer one of question which is there. I think Steve asked the question, for HYCU, do you have the ability to throttle the network, or can you specify maintenance windows so that no data copy is done within the business hours? Absolutely. So one of the things, in the interest of time, I did not show it, but absolutely, we do have the backup window constructs. The good thing is Nutanix is fantastic in the sense that there's very little performance impact on the production applications when we take a backup, because the way we do it is that we actually first do the snapshots. So the production system is touched only during the snapshot, and after that, and as you guys know, snapshots are extremely fast. And after that, we mount the copy onto our own controller and backup of that. Even with that, if you still want a backup window, you can actually specify the backup window. Absolutely, we do actually support that today. You can actually do that. And with regards to throttling the network, the way we end up doing is you can throttle the number of threads you actually want for a backup to actually go in parallel. So that's something we actually do allow today.
Excellent. Thank you, Subhaya. We got another question. This one is for Mark Crespi. So Mark, you mentioned that there's no EOL on your products, but is there some kind of estimate of how many years an older version should be used for?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So obviously, every hardware-based platform has, the law of physics apply, and at some point it does get older. But we have successfully had customers running, very large customers, running for as long as a decade before they've actually done a refresh. And again, we don't end the support contract. We continue to stock the parts for support. We continue to support the platforms on our latest and greatest software. But sometime around 8 to 10 years, our customers will typically voluntarily want a refresh. And the good news is that since our system is truly scale out and you can mix generations of product, typically our refresh cycles aren't an entire system all at once. So if you were running 6 or 7 or 8 ExaGrid nodes in a single scale out system, you may be refreshing the first 2 you purchased while maintaining your investment in the remaining ones that were purchased more recently. So it's a very, very flexible architecture. So no hard and fast rule other than obviously we always increase in density and hardware does have a physical life of some sort.
Perfect.
So, can I just thank you very much, Mark. I'll just do one other follow-on question to one of the things which was asked. This was regarding do we back up SAP HANA running on Linux OS? At this time, no. I'll be first up front. At this time, no. But there is absolutely work going on. We would love to hear your thing. We will definitely get in touch with you and we can follow up on that. Couple of other questions, Evan, you asked is definitely within the thing. We will definitely get in touch with you. With regards to, there is one other question I want to actually jump in. How does HYCU decide on which target it uses? So the way we end up doing from a target perspective is that, let's say, for example, it's an ExaGrid. We constantly look at, we don't look at the proximity today. Today, what we do is we don't look at the proximity, but we look at the latency, the throughput, and that's what we actually test. Throughput, both not just for the writes, also for the reads. We do that. We constantly do the testing. And based on, so what we do is we look at the size of your virtual machine, we look at the policy you define, and we look at your targets and try to find the right appropriate thing automatically for the customer. That's the first thing. The second thing is when you have multiple targets, we try to make sure it's load balanced so that one of them doesn't get completely bogged down. Those are some of the things we do. So back to you, Abbas.
Thank you. Thank you, Subhaya. Yep. So I'm just looking at the questions. You can put in your questions. While we're waiting, Mark Crespi, there's a question for you. What is the maximum size of your scale-out system?
Thank you for that. So currently, the maximum size of our scale-out system is what we refer to as a 2 petabyte full backup, which can ingest data at approximately 400 terabyte per hour. So we're aiming for roughly a 5-hour backup window at maximum ingest. What that 2 petabyte actually means is that can be the size of one instance of your primary amount of data. So your primary data under Nutanix management can be up to that 2 petabyte. And then we can store roughly 16 weeks of retention copies of that in that 2 petabyte system. So it's not an aggregate number of, adding up all of your backup data. It's literally, if you were to really look at our deduplication ratios, the logical capacity of something of that magnitude is going to be actually around 40 petabyte. But we size based on the amount of primary data that you have in your environment, and then factor in the amount of retention that your requirements need.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. And
can I ask you? I'll just answer one of the questions. Is the target storage for the backup for HYCU NFS or HYCU? The target storage we can support today: NFS, SMB, HYCU, S3, any S3 compatible storage, as well as Azure. So that's something we do. That's the spectrum we support today.
Perfect. There's another question. I'm not sure whether it is for you, Subaya or Mark. How's the sizing and licensing of the solution? Is HYCU sold embedded in ExaGrid?
Oh, that's a great question. So sizing and pricing today, it's done independently. To be honest, I'll give you guys the full thing. From the different systems, we actually have independent sizing thing. But we actually work as a team. I mean, we actually have excellent partnership, and we can actually work with you guys to put together a solution. HYCU itself runs as a virtual appliance on the Nutanix system and talks to the ExaGrid using the NFS protocol. NFS protocol, that's what we use today.
Yeah, from the ExaGrid perspective, our sizing is done based on the amount of capacity you require. There's no additional licensing requirements whatsoever. So whatever usable capacity you require, that's how we would size the system. And what you pay for our appliances includes all of the functionality, both what we're shipping today and then any future functionality is included under our support and maintenance contract.
Got it. I think we have time for one more question. Mark, this is for you. So what is the advantage of using ExaGrid over, let's say, the cloud?
So that's a little bit of a complicated question, but thank you for that. We do support the ability to use the cloud as a DR copy of your data. The challenge with using the cloud as a primary copy of your data is if you have any significant amount of data, recovering that data from the cloud during a significant outage can be prohibitive, right? If you had 50, 60, 70 terabyte or even more, then getting that data back out of a public cloud provider could be problematic. But we do support the ability, if you wanted to have a secondary copy of the data, which is typically more for regulatory requirements or disaster recovery, where the likelihood you'll need that data back in large numbers is pretty low, then we do support that ability. So I think less so of an advantage other than there's hurdles to using the cloud as a primary backup target.
All right. And I think with that, we are running out of time. We will continue the discussion. So there are a few questions which we have not yet answered. Our team will actually reach out to you all and answer the questions over email. Just a reminder, we will be sending you the webinar recording and all these slides for your reference. Thank you, Mark Niemeyer, Subaya, and Mark Crespi. And thank you all for being such a wonderful audience. Thank you, guys. Have a great day ahead.
Thank you all.
Thanks all.